Um, Welcome everyone. We are so happy to see you. This is session two of best practices in outreach for homeless people. And this one's focused on housing focused case management strategies and working on service plans with people. And it's me and Andrea again. I'm Suzanne Wagner. Andrea, want to give a wave and say hi.
Hi.
But we really want to turn it over to Molly to welcome you from Demas, your guiding light and support, and our great colleague on all things outreach.
Hey everybody, welcome to our second session of street outreach trainings with our friends at Housing Innovations. Whether you are new to homeless outreach work or not so new, been here for ages and ages and ages, I hope that you get something out of this training today and make sure you speak up, ask questions, share your feedback. Housing Innovations always tries to make these really interactive. So you get what you put into the training time that we've got ahead of you. And I hope that it's really helpful to everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Molly.
Thanks,
And
Molly.
we totally support all that. Talk, please engage. We have a lot of slides today, as always, but our goals really for the session are always consistent, even though the content is different, is really to have a real conversation with you about things that matter in your work, things you can apply right away. It's also a great place to share best practices, um, ask questions if you're unsure about what things mean or policy issues, and raise systems issues that are coming up or technology issues that are coming up. So we've had really great, I think, participation and also people really raising stuff that's important in their work. And that's our goal, is really to be relevant to your work. We love to see your faces. I see a lot of faces today. Normally I, like Ms. Louise, call everybody's names out, but I'm not going to do that today. But you know who's on camera. We'd love to see your face. Please turn your cameras on as much as you can. I think most people have changed their name if they have a special way they want to be addressed. You can change your screen name by just going to those three little dots at the top. If you want to be a superhero today, we always welcome new characters. We do have, as Molly said, we have breakouts. We have a poll today. We really like the interactions. So don't wait for us to pause and say, do you have a question or a comment? Just, put something in the chat, raise your hand, or, just unmute and start talking if you have something you want to say. The recording is usually posted within a day or so, and we hope the slides are already in the chat. They also were attached to the invite, that you can use this however it's helpful to you. Train other staff, watch it at home, help with insomnia. However it works for you, the slides and the recordings are really for you. And we have done a similar version of this training last year. We've updated it with things that have changed in the meantime, and also some content that's important to reinforce. We know that not a lot of people, but some people do not have access to a microphone on their workstation or their laptop. So there are breakout discussions, and especially that really want you to be able to participate. So you can use your phone, and there's the phone number and the ID and the passcode. So take note of that, take a screenshot if you need it, or it's in the slides. So we have really too many people to do introductions, because then it ends up taking like the whole training time. But if you would just put in the chat what your name is, name, agency, and your role or title, location in the state. Everyone is from Connecticut, but we have people from all around the state. It's good for us to know, have a sense of where people are from, and your favorite ice cream flavor. It's Tuesday, probably everybody had a busy Monday, and it's the afternoon on Tuesday, probably had a busy morning. Just to clear the deck, think about something fun and nice. And it's kind of sunny, a little cold for ice cream today, but sometimes some people just need sun and they're happy to eat ice cream. So, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream if you want to share it, or
Rocky
your favorite
Road
treat?
and ice cream is good all the time. I like it when it's actually a snowstorm and we're
Oh,
inside. I will have a bowl of ice cream.
Oh, that's
nice.
great, Miss Tyson. Some people are just like that. They can eat ice cream any day, any time of the day or night, any season. Any particular flavor, Miss Tyson?
Rocky Road is
Rocky.
one of my favorites. I do like butter pecan and maple walnut, which you don't see that
Mm.
Oh, you need to go to the specialty shop for your flavors.
often.
Pineapple, coconut, birthday cake, tiramisu, lots of different ones. This is a very diverse crowd. Uh, very diverse. Strawberry, cookies and cream, coffee. I like anything with chocolate in it, but I do love
Cheesecake.
the idea of creamy mango. I haven't had that. Cookie dough.
Grape nut ice cream, huh? Who
Okay.
knew?
This is clearly uh craft ice cream crowd. Artisan Connecticut farmers markets, right? There you can get these ice creams at specialty stores. All right. Okay. Coconuts.
Her
The more garbagey, the better. Chocolate.
boyfriend prefers garbagey ones. She prefers sorbetto.
Okay. Pistachio. Great. Hopefully that made everybody have a little smile. Think about ice cream after the training or during the break. Maybe you can grab some if you're like Miss Tyson and you can eat ice cream anytime, any day of the week. So, okay. Just to get a sense of, and I appreciate everyone continuing to have public chat and we can read it, but we're going to do a quick poll just to get a sense of who's in the room. I know oftentimes you're coming hopefully to all three of the series that we're doing right now, but some people miss skip and sometimes we have I'm sorry. So relaunch this poll. Okay. Just to get a sense of who's in the room. So this is simple questions. How long have you been working in your current position? And how much experience do you have in street outreach work? And those may or may not be the same. You have some choices. I know we've had a big spread in this group. Okay. Oh, we have almost 40 people have responded. So I'm just going to give it another 5 seconds. So what we see, okay, we have five folks who've been in the job only less than 3 months. So welcome. That's 13% of our crowd or of the people who responded. We had 40 respondents. About 43% are than 1 to 3 years, and then 4 to 7. So we have a bunch of veterans between 4 to 7 and more than 7. That's 33. A third of our crowd has been in the business, their positions more than 4 years. Okay. Some of you are very new. And then outreach experience in general, and just in the field, you can see the spread there. Okay. Longer than I can remember. We have a few real long-term veterans. More than 5 years is 20%. I'm reading from the bottom up. 3 to 5 years, about 25%, 1 to 3, 24%, and about 20% less than a year. Okay, so we have again a wide spread. So what I like about that is there's lots of expertise in the room. We just usually randomly assign you to breakouts, but hopefully the randomness results in, first of all, you meeting new people that you don't know and maybe making some new connections, but also having folks who have had experience and you can share you can have good experiences and successes in your first year of work, but definitely those years of outreach experience are really like nothing else. I see people are having a lot of discussion about the ice cream. Just checking the chat. Okay. I think I have a couple more slides. Excuse me, pardon me. So just we do like to start by recapping the last session, even though it was just a week. We know a lot went on in your week. A lot goes on in your hour of your day. So last week we introduced the statewide street outreach standards, and that green underlined link is a link to those standards. That's really the playbook for street outreach in Connecticut and has recently been updated, and it's meant to be a living document that's got tools in it and guidance for you as you do your work. And we went kind of deeply talking about the value, vision, and goals of outreach, really, which is really about engaging people through a respectful process that gives them choice, that's trauma informed, and leaving their unsheltered situation and going into housing. Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's permanent, but the plan is that they're getting into long-term housing. So we talked about that. And then we talked about the core of the work, the community engagement, and you need to engage people in order to do that housing work. Maybe if you had, pockets full of housing vouchers, people wouldn't need so much of a relationship, but we're not in that place right now. We don't have pockets full of housing vouchers that we could just hand out on the street and say, here, go find an apartment. It takes a lot more than that for a lot of our folks, and a lot of folks have a lot of other issues that are going to be barriers to getting a place. So engaging a relationship is really the core foundation of the work. And we talked about strategies to do that and create client-centered relationships. 100% of the population has experienced trauma. You guys know that really well. And maximizing people's choice in situations is really what we know from the evidence really works with folks. So talked about that. And then we also reviewed a couple of tools just to get you looking at the standards. I hope you have looked at the standards since last week, if you're one of the people who's not familiar with them. But we looked at a tool for kind of a checklist for after your first meeting with someone and in between meetings. And then today we're going to pick up on that and talk about strategies to achieve these outcomes. What is housing focused case management? What is that defined? And then we'll break down the pieces of that work into talking about building motivation, which is a key part of doing a plan with people, is them being motivated and us helping build that motivation that they can achieve that goal. And then we'll go into the specifics around assessment and service plan. We have sample documents and a sample plan. We'll also talk about, because if you're doing planning, coordination with community partners and community resources, and then talk about accessing housing options and making that transition with folks. So it's a lot in this session. Some slides are always for reference. And since we do have another session in 2 weeks, if there's things we don't get to today because we get engaged in conversation or things go the way they go, we can always pick up that content with session 3. So now I'm going to hand it over to Andrea.
Thanks, Suzanne. So let's talk a little bit about street outreach and the housing focus. Part of it is everybody's ready for housing, regardless of the complexity, the severity, and the needs. Services post-housing are designed as opposed to pre-housing to help people stabilize in the community. So we want to offer those services as soon as people move in, and we want to try to prevent returns to homelessness, but that everybody should be inside, right? The exact match is something we need to talk about, but everybody should remain inside. Okay. So one of the things that we're doing in order to bring people into this process is assertively engage them, which is people don't always trust or want to engage with us immediately. And that persistent and assertive engagement is really important. So that we're going to do that. We're going to figure out what their needs are, do an assessment, and we're going to actually offer you some basic assessment plans for assessment tools for outreach. And we're going to do some housing planning with them because that's really what we're offering people is a chance to come inside. We're going to really pay attention to what people's real goals are, and we're going to make sure that they're participant driven because that's what's going to motivate people to get past all these tasks that people need to get into housing. We're going to be recovery oriented, helping and hoping for people's lives to get better, and that's a really important thing. So part of this is telegraphing that hope. We're going to link people to community supports because you can't do this by yourself. And people are entitled to all those supports, and we're going to link them and we're going to teach them how to best use them. And that includes the supports that are services like income, benefits, health, behavioral health, but also social connections, faith communities. We want people to be part of a community because that's what's going to keep people grounded in the community. And finally, it's individualized, it's goal-based, and it's person-centered. So the plans are not going to be exactly the same for everybody, but there's going to be a similar goal, which is to get them off the streets into housing. Okay. So I mentioned hope. Hope is one of the big things, and these are things we're going to telegraph all the way through our work with people. And if people are going to change, they got to believe that things can be better. And part of that hope comes from you. You got to believe it's possible. And if you believe it's possible, they will believe it's possible. It's also something that's important to them. And that's what I was talking about in terms of felt goals and understanding what people's values are and what's the most important thing, because that's going to keep them on a track where things can get better. It's also helping people identify what they're good at, right? And talking to people about their skills and their resources, because people don't change if they don't think they have the capacity to change. And this is about really helping people have that confidence, which is going to help people move forward. So we're going to break people up into discussions. Introduce yourselves. You may not know everybody in this group. It's important that people connect with each other and be able to talk to each other afterwards too. And then you want to share strategies of things that you've used to build somebody's confidence in the ability to move forward. Also made progress with a person who's given up hope or may have no goals. What do we talk to people about in that situation? And how do we build that motivation for housing? So we're going to share this slide and we're going to break people up into groups.
I gotta ask about that quote.
Hey,
I gotta
David.
ask about that quote. Howard Schultz, is he the Starbucks guy?
I don't know.
The name sounds familiar. I'll tell you in a minute while I'm asking. Look
He
it up.
is the Starbucks guy, Howard Schultz. Yes.
Huh.
Funny he should say success is best when it's shared since he's anti-union. Just saying.
I never got nothing for free from him.
Okay.
He also has a net worth of $4.3 billion. So
Oh,
Yeah.
is he sharing that?
Change that visual. and
Okay.
quote.
Let
Yeah.
that go. Sorry, Suzanne.
No, it's okay. I actually thought, oh, I didn't, someone else on the team put it in. I don't know who, but I never even thought it was Howard Schultz. Yes, you're right. Starbucks. So, yeah, okay. Not a good
I
association.
thought he was the peanuts guy. Okay.
Oh,
George Schultz.
Charles, yeah. So what'd you think? Did you hear anything that was interesting to you that might be helpful? Interesting strategies to improve a client's confidence, give people hope?
Yeah, I have some feedback.
Great.
Yeah, what we spoke about was definitely the consistency
Yep.
and showing up for the client. That
Yep.
definitely builds confidence. I know in my own experience, we might not be talking about housing or strategies or anything, but just being there, that constant in that
Yep.
individual's life builds extreme confidence when it comes to actually trusting the process.
Absolutely. Just showing up is really important, and that I shouldn't say just showing up is really important.
Right.
Absolutely. And
When you're
people have
telling
been left
the
alone.
person, yeah.
Hmm?
As you say, you're telling the person they're important. You show up for the
That's
client.
right.
Absolutely.
yeah, and celebrating our successes too,
Yep.
showing other people like, hey, your buddy just housed, like we took him out of a tent. That tent site is now down. Like that for me goes far because in the beginning outreach just showed up and, kind of asked some questions and
Mhm.
did that. But now we're really engaged in the housing process and we'll take you from a tent to an apartment. And they believe that because they see it.
hmm
Absolutely.
Working in a smaller town, Willimantic, they all know each other. So
Yep.
when one's housed, they all know about it. And then they come running like, hey, I want what he has. Like, help me get what he has. And we say, this is how you do it. And then they believe us,
It's
So
great.
that's kind of big.
Absolutely.
Great.
I just would like to recognize, I think, something that we had talked about in our group, which is like just one of the challenges of being able to instill hope and be there consistently, which is we didn't talk about this in my group, but I'm just sitting here thinking about like burnout and, when we have turnover consistently and just how much that impacts the population.
Yep.
If you're making progress with someone, you have a caseworker, and then boom, all of a sudden they're gone. And, you as the worker coming in, you have to start fresh and, kind of be able to build off whatever you can grasp your hands on that was done already. But yeah, I just wanted to recognize that that is like a unique challenge is kind of some of that hope, uh, is more difficult when you don't have a consistent worker that you can work with.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's one of the reasons why people rely really heavily on teams sometimes, because if there's more than one person, you can control for some of that. But it's really hard to get the consistency when when there's a lot of turnover. And that affects people's not only in that situation, but in this situation of accepting a worker the next time. Yeah.
Well, and they may have gained some momentum with the person and then they're back at square one, right? With
Yep.
trust. I don't know who you are. Are you really going to do, the way we were doing it together? It's different with you. Every person is different. So it's a challenge to turnover. It's a challenge on both sides for staff and for the clients. I think that's one of the things we like to call out is that the way Connecticut has done outreach is compared to the way it's done in a lot of other communities around the country is with this team-based kind of can-based model
Yep.
is meant so that there are more people who know people. But I know that some of your teams are bigger and some are smaller. So it's not always the same to have backup. But I think that team concept, as Andrea said, is really an important part of who is working with the client. I know it's a person, but it's really the team.
Yeah, I think the in reach with other outreach workers and other case managers, in case they leave, well, I do know your case. Like I can come and tell you and leaving good notes, like definitely documenting things so I can pull up their profile and say, okay, on this day, someone did this with you. And they start to believe that, okay, you guys are all connected, even though you work for different agencies. You do have my best interest, and we're able to kind of do warm handoffs and things like that. And it helps us immensely, to meet amongst ourselves too.
Yep. And George, that's can wide, right?
I believe so, yeah.
That's great. Other stuff, how do you interest people in housing? Are people just coming to you for housing? One of the ways that George talked about is that as they see other people making progress towards housing and getting housing, that interests people in housing. It gives them that hope and that confidence to go towards housing. Are there other ways that you interest people in housing? Do you
So
talk to people? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, our shelter now is we consider it a housing program instead of a shelter.
Ah,
Come in here, you're going to work on housing, and that allows you to stay here. We're still going to let them stay there, of course, but just having that kind of verbiage where everyone is all talking about housing
yep.
kind makes them believe like, okay, like I'm not just going to sit and wait, like I'm going to everywhere I go, all these people are going to say, hey, like, what are you working on your housing? So keeping that up is big, not letting them sit back and just veg, staying on top of that and keeping them active is.
It
I
also
think,
gives them a message of hope is that that's what we're here for. We're here to help you get housing, right? So it
Yep.
helps.
we also
Okay.
don't rely on just vouchers either.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Yep. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, encouraging employment. That's one of the requirements, is you got to get
Increasing.
get some money up, either job, and we can help you through that process, or apply for SSI. Like getting some income really helps you, get to the next step. You bring me 4 pay stubs and a renter's agreement, and we'll get you housed.
Yep.
Also employing a housing locator at our agency has really helped. Someone who has apartments, not in their back pocket, but knows, of landlords. So if we bring someone with income, there's no gap in the process. We get them doc ready, they got income, they go right to the housing locator and they start working on housing.
So you've defined the path, which is really important. And I know people have talked about that before, but the other thing that you're doing is starting it really early. And I know that's something that people really want to do is start that income increasing and the talk about housing as early as possible. Okay. Anybody else? So let's talk a little bit about this process and the service planning process. So that once people are enrolled for PATH, but also enrolled and you're working with them as a case manager, you want to complete the service plan within 30 days of enrollment. You have guidelines about when to enroll. You want to update the plan at least every 90 days, probably even more frequently if you can. And that we're going to start this process, which includes engagement, which we've been talking about, finally assessment, goal development, and that includes people's own perceived goals that really up the motivation and that motivation building and also developing that plan. So I think Suzanne just put a plan in the.
I
No?
just put the slides. The slides,
Okay.
these are linked in the slides.
Okay. So this is the assessment and service plan template. And there's also a completed sample.
That we're going to
So-
review in a few slides, the
Okay,
same.
yeah. Okay.
So I just want to make a comment because I know this is really important when we were talking with Molly about this session is that once we're getting into doing goals and service plans with people that we want to make sure they're enrolled in HMIS, right? And that,
Yes.
having a line of when you're going to enroll people, what does the activity need to look like? Because sometimes you're running into people and you're helping them, but you haven't really engaged your relationship, and having an internal process for when you're going to enroll people. And certainly before you're going to be doing service plans for people, you want to make sure they are enrolled in the program.
Yep.
Molly, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I just know a lot of teams are doing so much work with folks even before the point of enrollment. So just want to
Mhm.
make sure that all outreach staff are really talking with their supervisors. If there's someone you're doing ongoing repeated work with, you want to make sure that you can get them enrolled in your program. You can make
Yep.
sure your records are reflecting all of that work that you are doing. Because it's such a bummer to know that work's been happening with someone for 6 months and you never did that one step of program enrollment, even though you've been doing so much to support folks. So just want to encourage everyone to think on that, talk with your supervisor about what program enrollment needs to look like. And if you have questions, hey, should I have enrolled this person in my program? Really make sure you're talking that through and that's part of your regular supervision structure.
And having those tools like the assessment and the plan and the case notes is going to be so important for that consistency that everybody's been talking about. So particularly because we do have some turnover and that sort of stuff, we want to do that as soon as possible, as soon as we're entering into that case management relationship.
Oops. Sorry.
So needs assessments are a process. And that they'll unfold over time, and everybody's not going to give you all the information on the first date. So you want to make sure that you continue to ask the questions. And it also requires trust. And I mean, people have been asked a lot of questions in their lives, and they don't always lead to something, and it's annoying. And so if people feel like the questions that you're asking them will lead to something and you can explain that, that's a huge help. And that helps really build trust in the process. As the client experiences challenges, progress, the assessment's going to deepen and it's going to help point you in the right direction. And a lot of it's trial and error and listening for what the person really wants and is interested in. It's what we talked about values and real goals that people have is a critical part of this process. And people feel listened to, they feel like their values are respected, and they also feel like you're going to help them get the things that they really want, which provides a lot of motivation. You're going to use that assessment to inform that service plan.
So when we go further in this, you'll see part of the service plan is to have goals and dates and all those things.
Yeah.
But you uncover goals in the assessment process. And so we present this as kind of a linear process, but you're assessing, you're starting to learn about people's goals probably before you sit down to do the plan, but they're all related to one another. But it's in learning about people and who they are is learning about what their desires are, what their dreams are, what they want. It's not, it's definitely learning about what issues and conditions need help, right? Like I have a hurty foot, or I need some counseling, or I need to find a meeting, but also finding out in that process, who people are, what they're interested in, what they like, what makes them laugh, what they find to be fun. And that helps us as we try to set goals with people. Because I think it can be really hard. People are on the street and you're trying to set a goal and they're
Yep.
like, you're talking to me about a goal. I'm on the street, and I have a place to live. So, okay, yeah, it's going to be housing. But we want to understand what that housing is going to mean to that person, right? But that we learn by talking to them about their housing history. And then we start to learn what's important to them in their housing.
So the areas in assessment we're going to focus on, and this is coming from the research, some of it was before CTI and critical time intervention, but part of it is these are things that most affect people's access to housing and people's stability in housing. And that we always have to focus on when we talk about housing, we're talking about both access and stability long term, right? Because we have to work on both those goals at once. So in order to know that, Suzanne mentioned, we're going to have a conversation with people about what their housing history is, what their homeless history is, what their barriers are to stability, but what they're good at, what they liked about their housing in the past. We're going to get them to describe it for us. We're also going to know what their patterns are when they're homeless, what their roles are, those sorts of things. And you're going to see some of those echoes in that even abbreviated assessment. We're going to find a little bit about income, what they've used before, what works for them, what's their financial literacy, what's their education and training, because we're always going to think about employment that might supplement benefits or might replace benefits. So we're looking towards that increasing income. Going to find out what they're good at, what their life skills are, and they should be tied to housing. In the old days, we used to talk about ADLs, like, can you make a Salisbury steak? I don't really care if somebody can make a Salisbury steak, but I want to know that they know when to ask for help. They know how to commit, do they know how to negotiate for resources they need? What would be helpful there? Those sorts of things. So you're going to see some of that. We want to know about their family, their friends, their other supports and people that support them, and also what their relationship in the future and what they're looking for. We're going to, of course, look at psychiatric and substance use issues, and we're going to look at health and medical issues. We're going to look at their history. We're going to get them to describe that. We're also going to ask them about their current, and we're going to ask them about what their strengths are and how they feel, how they manage things in the past, what their barriers are, what motivates them, and what their goals are. And the goals are very important, as Suzanne mentioned. We want people to talk about real goals that reflect their values and reflect how they want their future to look. And that we're going to connect housing to those goals, right? And if you're having trouble finding goals, in my experience, it's money, honey, and wheels. Those are all things that most people want. Think about yourselves, right? So that we can talk about that and we can connect housing to those things. Okay. So the other thing is we do want to take a deeper dive, have a bigger conversation about housing and homeless history, because that's going to affect how people make choices in the future. We want to know where they've lived and who they've lived with and what their role was in the household. They may not have had a lease in their name. We want to know that, by the way. But we also want to know if they were part of a household, what was their sort of responsibility and how did they get along with that household, what they liked, what they didn't like, reasons they left. We're going to ask about experience as a leaseholder. A lot of times people might have had a lease in their name, but it wasn't enforced the way that we're trying to do that. And they may not be aware of tenants' rights and they may base things on that. and of course, what worked and what didn't. Then we're going to talk about people's homeless history. We're going to ask people the question about what caused their initial episode. I will say that that was usually a traumatic experience and something people may have a really hard time describing. We don't want to push really hard on that, but that's a really good example as trust unfolds and as motivation unfolds, people will be more likely to share that with you. So you're not going to necessarily get everything. It's a good example of assessments unfolding over time. Sometimes people are more than willing to share that. Sometimes they're a little reluctant. And there have been some horrific stories about how people became homeless. We're going to want to know how long they were homeless, how they were homeless, what's their patterns of homelessness. Sometimes people will stay with people for a period of time, then be on the streets. That tells you something very different than if people were just on the streets. We want to know the places they've stayed and sort of how they've stayed there. It tells us a lot. For instance, some people like to be around other people. So they may be part of an encampment and they might have had a role in that encampment. Other people want to be around other people, but are afraid about their behavior and that sort of thing that might cause problems. So they will be on the peripheral of the encampment. Those certainly don't disqualify people from homelessness, but it's an important part of the information. So the assessment means we use our eyes, we listen to people, and we try to figure out how people have lived before. We want to know their routine, what their role is. As I mentioned, some people are like the cook for the encampment. That might be a role that they want to, continue. That might provide them structure in their life. It gives them some structure and purpose. So let's think about how we can continue that role. We also want to know who supported them and how they got those supports. We also want to know, I know it comes up all the time, that bartering or sort of trading things is a big part of being homeless. We want to know about that pattern because that's definitely going to affect their ability to maintain housing and how that affects it and how you're going to approach it. So we want to know those sorts of things. Suzanne, do you want to say something? Yeah.
Yep. Supports and how they finance, even though obviously financing living outside is different from
Yes.
financing living inside, but you still need money most of the time, although there is always bartering. And I guess I just want to draw the thread of why do we want to go so deep on such a hard topic with people? Because it is usually trauma that led to their homelessness, that we know that, like a loss of a relationship, a job. Sometimes it's a cumulative set of losses, and that causes folks to become homeless. We really want to do it so that we know we want to prevent when they get housed again, right? So if they became homeless because they really did not know how to follow a lease and manage that, then that's going to give us guidance about what we need to have in place and what kind of housing is going to work best for that person. So we want to know so that we can both be kind of anticipatory, but also in an understanding the homelessness, which is a different story from their housing history, is how big of a transition is this going to be? And we're going to talk about transitions at the end. And for a lot of the folks who are living outside, unsheltered, it's been a while that they've been like that, and it's a big adjustment to come inside. I know some people are newer to the streets, some people are longer or maybe repeatedly coming back and forth from institutions to the streets. But that homeless history tells us a lot about how they're going to live in their housing as well, and what the losses are going to be, what the gains are going to be, what skills they have. And, if someone is a leader in a camp, I think it's just an easy example that we use a lot. And then they go out and live in their own apartment out in the community, and there's nobody to lead, which could also be called boss, around. What are they going to do all day, right? So that's a role issue. And we talk a lot about role when people move into housing, but people have a role when they're homeless as well. So this isn't just, getting information to get it, but it's really getting information that's going to help us be so much more able to work with them around a housing goal and supports that's going to meet their needs, right? A lot of folks have never had a lease. A lot of folks have not had that kind of responsibility. So it's going to be a different thing from someone who may have had a mortgage. And I know there was someone who was living in their car who actually was someone who had a mortgage, right? That was in Connecticut. So those are different people than someone who's never had a lease.
Yep. So from this, we're going to build this service plan, right? And the service plan provides structure for the work, provides predictability, and guides the work. And if you're working on setting goals and developing a service plan with a person, they should be enrolled in your program, right? If you're starting to talk about plans for the future, if you're starting to do the assessment, they should be enrolled. So the goals are set in partnership. We're going to make sure that it's participatory. And it's focused on things that matter to them. And as I said, a lot of the things that we ask people to do, are not particularly sexy, are not particularly fun, right? Okay, you're going to go to Social Security and go get a card. It's hard to whip up enthusiasm for that. Yay! Right? But if they want to get housing because they want to maybe reunite with their family, we're going to talk about this being part of that process and really focus on those long-term goals. We want goals that people can feel, right? That means something to them personally. I always hit my heart when I say that. It's something that people can feel in their chest. We happen to use something called the So That principle, but it's really a question about what does this goal mean to you? Though it's a little bit less confusing when you say you want housing so that what happens? Because we really want to know that. What do they hope happens when they get housing? And that's going to really help people make that transition. Okay. I did see a comment before when we were talking about the assessment, and Kay Feller said that we want to know where people have been to see where they're going. And that's exactly right. We want to make progress possible, and we want people to see the progress. People haven't had a lot of positive finishing things, that sort of stuff. We want to make sure that the goals are set in small bites so that people can see that they're making forward progress, or that we can be triggered to reframe the goals because maybe it's not a goal they really want, right? But we don't want to let goals linger. I don't know about you all, but when I first started in supportive housing, everybody had a goal of finishing a GED, and some people had that goal on their charts for 8 years, right? How discouraging would that be, right? We don't want those kind of goals, right? We want not the GED. Sometimes the GED is right, but we don't want goals that are going to last forever. We want goals that people can see real progress. So we want it in small bites. We want to be able to talk about it. Most importantly, we want these goal plans to be working documents and something we talk about frequently with people. We don't want to wait till the end of 9 months to take a look at the goal plan because by then people are already discouraged or feel like they're done or something. Like we want to take a look at that, right? And we want to get those small bites so people can really feel progress and feel like they've completed something, which is a huge motivator for people. And
T.
they
Anderson
haven't had
put
that
in the
experience.
chat, obtainable goals, which are short term, or a
Yep.
goal that can be measured, right? So people
Yeah.
can be recognized. You want to come off mute, T. Anderson, and say a word or two, or just happy with your note in the chat?
That's a good point.
Okay, well, we appreciate that because I think that is true, right? That we want to figure out how people can be successful. Maybe the long-term goal is going to take a long time to achieve. It's going to take a lot of steps to, become a
Yeah.
medical doctor, like one of our clients wanted to be a medical doctor when she still hadn't gone to high school. But we aren't going to say you're never going to become a medical doctor. We're going to break that into little steps, and steps like getting a GED in that case was a small step, not a big step for her. But um, thinking about how people can feel like they did it, I got this, could really help build that because people are pretty beaten down by the time they're on the street, right? They really have lost their confidence and ability to feel like they can get stuff done.
Absolutely. Okay. So Suzanne said the plan includes both short and long-term goals. And the long-term goals are often the aspirational goals, right? And those are the goals that ground people. We try to limit the goals that we're working on actively with people to no more than 3. It's overwhelming to work on more than 3. And as I said, we want people to feel progress. And if you have 10 goals, it's really hard to feel any progress, right? So that we want to really limit those to no more than 3. 1 is perfectly acceptable, 2 is perfectly acceptable, right? And we want to focus on income, and you guys have said this, income, housing, and supports and resources, right? And that we want to use that plan to build motivation. So I'm going to go back to what we talked about. We talked about confidence. As people move towards the plan and see some success, they're going to build their confidence. It's going to build their feelings of competence. I encourage you to, when people have achieved goals, those short-term goals, let them tell you the story about how they did it, right? And that's going to really cement that in people's hearts. It's you want to, if it's important to them. Sometimes things become not as important because people don't think they're possible. So it's that hope, and that's also showing people the progress, that it really elevates the importance and the possibility of housing to people. It also builds on that success so they can try other things. If you feel confident and competent, you can try other things. If you don't feel that way, why would you? It also includes tasks for the worker and the participant. So this goes to the consistency and creating expectations of the worker and really reiterating the worker's role. It's really important that they know what you're going to do and that they can negotiate that with you. And in my experience, people like telling me what to do a lot more than, right? So that's really important. And but it opens up that conversation about how you're going to get these tasks done. So having the worker role in there is critically important. Okay. So as I mentioned, those supports and those services are really critical to this. You cannot do everything. Though sometimes you think, well, that's my job to do everything. It's not. There are a lot of people out there who can really help you, and we want to make sure that people get the full benefits that they're entitled to. So it's including connections to really high quality and sustainable resources that can continue even after you're not working with somebody. And that includes both supports and services. So you want to update the plan frequently. You want to include those in the plan. As we said, 90 days is standard, but often, more often if needed, if people are moving through their goals or you had to reframe the goals, you probably want to do something again. That only happens as you revisit those plans on a regular basis. It also requires you going back to the assessment, updating the assessment, and as it's informed with your conversations. As we mentioned, assessments get deeper over time as trust builds, as people feel accomplished, as people feel they're competent in other things. You want to really do that. Informal supports and community resources are going to deepen. They'll tell you more about that. There is no service plan in HMIS. You want to use the paper templates or your own and upload it into HMIS. And we have a sample plan for you.
And an earlier slide had a blank one, and this is a completed one. So
Yes.
it's the template with a fictitious person in there. So
let's go through this a little bit. So you see this is a simplified assessment. One of the questions is, what's that person's plan to end their homelessness? We have found that to be an incredibly successful question because people often do have a plan and they won't necessarily tell you unless you ask them, right? And that actually in Cleveland, they started asking people in shelters this, and about 60% had plans. I'm not saying they're all great plans, but you know what? It's a start in the right direction. What motivates this person? That's that goal. What's important to this person? Why do they want to get housing? They want to have, this person wants to have a safe place where her and her dog can sleep. That's an incredibly big motivator, right? We talk about long-term goals, right? So we can weave that into the housing plan. This is going to be a foster parent for an animal rescue. Last time this person had a permanent place to stay, important, 10 years. Describe the place. They lived with an ex-girlfriend. Okay, so that sort of fell apart. Describe how the person sleeps now. That's in. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. Um, Factors that led to homelessness. And then, has the person ever been in the military? It's because the military and the VA have incredible resources. So we always want to ask that question. Um, and then people who provide support, you notice the first one is Cupcake Doe, her dog, right? And then it talks about other people in their life, the soup kitchen person, the girlfriend, a friend, and then an emergency contact, which is incredibly important. And that's also the person who can usually find the person. That's an important thing. And then it goes through strength summary, and this is from the client's perspective, but it's also built on the assessment that you're doing. So here it says the client's probably not going to say they're resourceful, but they know how to stretch a dollar. That one of the worker added it, they're resourceful. That's important. And as you see, this goes through every category: income and financial, employment, housing, health, mental health, substance use, family and support, skills, and education. And then there's an other, which Cupcake made another appearance here. Um, she wants you to know that that's the most important thing in her life, and she's excellent at being a good mom to Cupcake. So that's a huge strength, and that's something that really gives her a feeling of accomplishment, and that's an important thing to know.
And we're going to get some of this from the person, and we're going to get some of it from observation, and we're
Absolutely.
going to get some of it from records. I think one thing, as we think about a lot of our folks have been in other systems, like the hospitals or psych hospital or medical or maybe in prison, and if we can get any background information that can help fill in the story, that can really help, that we don't have to ask everyone all these questions. But I think we see here, like when we're thinking about housing for her, we are looking back at that relationship issues seem to be a big deal for her, which is actually probably the most common reason that people become homeless is conflict in a relationship. They live with someone else because most people live alone. And then she also has this income gap, right? So we already know there's some things that we're going to need to work on with her. Okay.
Hey,
You want to go keep
Andrea,
going?
Yeah.
Andrea, I picked up something that might be relevant here.
Okay.
The question is about military service. So in some assessments, we ask people, "Are you a veteran?"
Yeah.
And I was advised, don't ask that, don't ask it that way, because there are people who served in the military don't consider themselves veterans. Do I have
Yep.
that right? So asking if you had any military service is a better question. So you got it right here.
It's an important point, and we saw a lot of people who didn't identify as a veteran. Actually, people in my own family don't identify as veterans, though they certainly were, right? So it was an important thing to ask people, and if you ask people about their military services, you usually get a more complete answer.
Yeah.
It's a good point. This is a barrier summary. I'm not going to go through it, but it goes in the same categories as the strength summary, right? And we're going to take a look at what are the barriers to getting people housed. Okay. Asking people the question, what are the most significant barriers? What are the ones that have given them most trouble? What are the most significant issues that interfere with people's safety or well-being? Once again, as Suzanne said, some of this is from the history, some of this is definitely from observation, and some of this is from having that conversation with people. And then any other comments people add? This is a particularly helpful comment. She talked about getting a job, which is not something that I thought when we first started this assessment. And she was also interested in connecting with her family. So you want to leave yourself open to these other things that might be important to people. And sometimes these sorts of questions open you up to that sort of thing. And as you see, this follows from it. There's nothing on the top. The goals from the previous plan. This is the first plan. And then the number one goal is to live in an apartment with their dog, right? And you see that the outreach staff is going to do some of these things, and there are dates on them, target dates on them. So introduced to two people who could verify their disability. and decide if they're comfortable talking to these people. So these go together and you see how this progresses, and you also see the due dates. They're not necessarily at the completion of the plan, but they're really part of the process of accomplishing that overall goal of living in an apartment. Getting SSI, right? They're going to start the SOAR process, hopefully. And then reconnecting with their niece, which is really goes to the supports there, right? And under family and friends. And then help them locate their niece, maybe participate in that, maybe call her. There's signatures on the bottom, the participant signature, of course, the staff signature, and the supervisor signature. And having the supervisor keyed in to these plans and these assessments can be really helpful. They can give guidance on this. It may be also reviewed in a team meeting or something because people might have had experience. A lot of the homeless people in Connecticut have worked with many different people, particularly the long-term homeless. So doing this in a team meeting can be really helpful, but you want somebody else to take a look. It also elevates the importance from the client's perspective, and they know that other people are part of the team and are working with them.
Go back. Ready?
Yep.
So this is just
So there's an assessment and service planning webinar that's available to you. Their presentation slides, path assessment, this is the one we're using, and planning as a PDF. And then there's a recording. And I see a comment here. Also make sure the documentation for the dog is on hand if needed and required. That's really important. That's something that we can make sure happens. Those resources, there was actually a training on working with people with pets or service animals or companion animals, and that's available on recording, and there's some good resources. One of the big ones that we have been using, Suzanne actually has been very involved with them. It's My Dog is My Home, and they can help you get some of those documents, but they can also give you places for vet care, pet food, that sort of thing, and provide support and training around working with people with animals.
well, and in this case of Jane, she may just consider Cupcake may just be a pet. But,
Yeah.
and we get into this in the training. Is it, oh no, I just spilled water all over everything. Is it a pet or is it a service animal? Um, and she may not have it as a service animal, but maybe that's, or an emotional support animal,
Yeah.
maybe that's going to be helpful to her as she tries to stay with that, with her pet. So we want to make sure if you are working with someone with a pet, to take a look at that training on some of those. It includes resources, but it also, I think for some folks, it's going to be helpful to have the animal be considered a service animal. I mean, an
Yeah.
emotional support animal at a minimum. Service animal, you need more training, but I think that I appreciate T. Anderson really saying getting a little deeper on the whole piece.
Yep.
Oh boy.
Did it get on your computer?
Yes, water spilled.
Mm.
So I think you may need to share the slides right now until I'm having a little trouble
Okay.
getting my cursor back. Let me see if I can.
Okay. I'll
I
start that
can't.
process.
I have to. I
Yeah.
want to pause the recording for a second, Liz.
Welcome back. So, what did you hear? I heard some interesting goals. Essence, you had a good goal. No? Don't want to talk about it? Okay.
Goals, main goals for these clients that are required to get housed.
Right. So, somebody wanted to get housed, but you also talked about family, right?
No.
No. Okay. And I
I think that was
confused it.
me.
Where are you?
I'm over here. It was Kiana. I think it might have been me.
Kiana, yes, it was you.
Yeah. You had popped into mine real quick, so you might have combined like me and essences, maybe.
I popped into like 3 of them. Sorry.
No problem.
So
Oh, but
Kiana, you
yes.
want to talk about that a little bit?
So I was talking about how one of my clients' goals was employment and how it kind of related to housing was, housing vouchers and stuff, basically only cover the cost of housing, and he wants to be employed to, try and earn some of his own money to be able to pay for other things. And another one of his goals regarding housing was, just or motivations for housing was to have somewhere to have his daughter be able to come safely, somewhere that he can have his family come,
Yeah.
somewhere that he doesn't have to like worry about who's around, or just basically worry about safety regarding specifically his daughter, and being able to have her somewhere and have her come visit and be able to spend time with her independently and not have to depend on other people or other people providing a place to spend time with her. So things like that.
So Kiana, one of the things that you did is you helped him really paint a picture of what he wanted his housing to look like, which is going to be a huge motivator for him.
Yeah, definitely.
And and housing is definitely something that can help him do that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And like Andrea says, some of the not so fun parts of housing, like, all the paperwork you have to do and all that, but his motivation is his daughter, right? And that's the
Right.
real, so that I want housing so I can have a relationship with my daughter. And therefore the housing needs to be safe and it needs to be a place she's going to feel comfortable coming. So we know so much about the housing option from him by just understanding how important it is for his place to accommodate his daughter in some way, right?
Exactly. And he always says things along the lines of, before I was playing around, but this time I'm really serious. Like I really need it to, I need this to be different this time, because he's really trying to, move forward on those things and not, play around anymore. He's tired of, the back and forth and the sometimes it's stable, sometimes it's unstable. He's like, he was like, this is going to be different than previous times. And I'm like, yeah, definitely, for sure.
It's great. And it's real to him.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else have a good example? No? Nobody wants to talk? Okay.
We
All right.
did one. We did one
Okay,
about
great.
obtaining, finishing their GED exams
Uh-huh.
so that they could get a better job and have better opportunities, as well as setting an example for their daughter.
Ah, that's a really important one, right? That's probably getting at their heart. I want to show my daughter that things are possible. It's a great one.
And I'm going to be a good role model for her. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always, think when we do this example, some of my earliest work was with older teenagers, 16 and older to 21. And we would do their service plans, and every one of them had the goal to improve their independent living skills. Like, have you ever met a teenager? Have you ever met a teenager who says it's my goal to improve my independent living skills? No, right? But maybe getting a driver's license, which is an independent living skill, right, was something that people would be interested in, right? So if somebody, says that, well, what is it really understanding? What is it that's going to motivate that person is so important. Because, we say, and they say, okay, yeah, housing goal. And then they don't do anything, right? Or nothing happens. And that's because we really haven't sussed out what it is, what kind of housing they want, why they want it, help them also maybe articulate some of their fears about that, right? Because that may be part of why people aren't pursuing the housing goal, even though it's on the service plan, is because they're afraid that they're going to fail. So why get it, right? And then you're like, well, wait, you were supposed to go get that paper last week, right? And that didn't happen. But if we have a better understanding of really what's important about this and why housing is important, if they're comfortable where they're living, where they're staying now, it is a lot of work to get housing. So getting that, so that really helps us to know what's important to the person. We could keep reminding them. And also, like within the case of Kiana's the daughter, can they meet now? Is she an adult? Can they visit together? Is there some way to build that connection up as well now? And maybe that actually helps with a housing option, right? And you don't know what the person's situation is. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna move on. So that hopefully provoked some thoughts about goals and, like the other example, I think, Andrea, I should say this one, and I talk about is that people will tell us they want to get sober.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with sobriety, right? Like it's great. For some people, that is really the answer, but it's a hard answer. It's a lot of work. But what's the reason behind that? Is it because they think that's what you want to hear? And I think that goes to my teenager example, right? They're telling me they want to improve their independent living skills because that's what all the other social workers want to hear, right? And, maybe the person does really want to get sober and, having that conversation about sobriety and what it means to them and what it's going to do for them is an important part of evaluating that goal so that we're not wasting our time on something that isn't really meaningful. Right. And I think you guys are busy, busy, busy. You don't need to spend time working on goals that are really just like, oh, well, I'll just shut that Suzanne up by giving her a goal and she'll, keep her busy. So
The big
Okay.
difference, somebody told me once when they said they wanted to get sober is so their family will trust them again. And I thought, now there's a real goal, right? That's something they
Yeah.
really feel. That's something they really work on.
Yeah,
It's a very
something you
different
can
thing.
feel. Yep. More, absolutely. So the other thing we saw in Jane Doe's, I think that was her name, service plan was some of the resources like SOAR was mentioned in there, right, as a resource, which SOAR has changed, and we're going to talk about that in a minute in the last year, but that was one of the resources. The CAN was another resource, right? So it's important for us, I think, we want to include that in the plan, but I know one of the great things about Connecticut is that you are CAN-based and hopefully have some centralized resources or resource whisperers in your CAN, like, the person to call who knows all the secrets about, the Social Security office that's in your area, in your town. I know more and more that they're asking people to show up in person at the Social Security office to verify they're alive, especially with people who don't have other ID, which might apply to a lot of our people, right? But anyway, those relationships and partnerships and linkages are a big part of the program. So you want to make sure you have connections on your team. And this is really more kind of just a reference slide. And then also, how are you integrating them in the plan? So what are the resources we want to connect up Jane with, or Andrea or Suzanne? So we've got in the housing world, we've got our coordinated access network, obviously a key partner, landlords, where we get vital documents or emergency money. That's important to know in your CAN. What are the options for benefits, employment income, credit repair, financial literacy? Are there places where people can work on those things? A couple of you mentioned people who have employment histories, right? Maybe they have debts they need to pay off, or they have, they need to address things that are on their credit score, right? And really improve their choices, the amount of choices they have if you have a better credit score, whether it's legal or not. People check your credit score before you get an apartment, because it's so easy now, right? I think a couple of states have a bill to make that illegal, but I'm not sure. Claudette, I see your
Hi,
hand is raised.
Suzanne. You mentioned Social Security.
Yeah.
That's a big deal for me right now. Getting a Social Security card. Okay. So before I was able to go with ROI and go to Social Security with just like a discharge summary and the ROI and apply for the client's Social Security card. So then they said, no, that's not acceptable. Then they gave me their ROI and said I had to have that completed by the client and then I can do it that way. So then did it that way with their ROI, and I was told, no, they can't accept that. Went again with the ROI and another representative accepted it. Went again and somebody else said, no, we don't accept that. So the point I'm making is, depending on the representative you get at Social Security depends whether they accept the information that you have. Can Social Security set a proper guideline as to what it is they want from us? Right now, I'm doing it. I'm getting the medical records from the medical records office, and doing it that way and sending it in by mail. But I would love to try and go back to where I can just go into the office. The office is 5 minutes away, and it was so much easier that way. And if we can continue doing that way, if we can set something up with Social Security where they will accept certain documents of ours so that we don't have to go through the long process and try and like find the clients and bring them in. Like, because sometimes some of our vehicles are not allowed to bring the clients in our vehicles for insurance reasons, and it just makes the process so long and dragged out, and it can miss opportunities for housing for some clients. Is there a way that something can be put in writing with Social Security to make it the process a lot easier without having to drag the client in or try and locate the client to bring them in? Because sometimes it's hard to get them to come into the office to get that done.
Absolutely. I hear you. And I hear the frustration of that. And I also hear about the arbitrariness and the lack of consistency in the rules. And we're experiencing this with a lot of things right now in government because changes in policy on the federal level and requirements. And I know I did a lot of work with Social Security in different administration, a couple administrations ago, and there are regional Social Security offices that you can sometimes do some planning with. Like each Social Security is part of a region, and that has been an effective way to maybe make some arrangements. But I think also those local Social Security office relationships that you have are probably a really, really important start for any kind of advocacy. But I think right now, as they're getting a lot of different messages about fraud and verifying fraud, and I just know I was looking at something with Social Security, and if you didn't have one of these forms of ID, then you had to show up in person, right? And that now becomes a burden, like you said, of getting the person in and getting them in if you can't transport them or they don't make appointments very well. I don't know if there's any. I see James's hand came up, but and I'm looking at Molly too.
Can I just say that they did
Yeah.
say that the Department of Corrections, they had something set up because where clients can't go in person, where I don't know what the situation they have set up with the Department of Corrections, but they said that if we had something set up similar to that, then that would work very well.
Great. Well, that's actually what we did. It was a agreement between corrections and Social Security because we were working on getting SSI for guys in prisons, state prisons, and it was an MOU. And I don't know if Demas, I guess it might be Molly, I guess it might be Demas might be the analogous organization to corrections, although you're not corrections, obviously.
No.
Yeah, I think part of everything Suzanne just said is exactly right. Every time we've had issues like this, and Claudette, I know you flagged this for me a couple times when we went back and forth with some of the SSA public affairs specialists for the state. Part of it is that there is really strong federal guidance and expectations coming out around sort of how folks need to present and how local offices need to be documenting things. There's also been kind of there are some other areas of the Social Security process that have been more centralized, so local area offices have less authority over some things. But I would say as you're running into these specifics, to the extent that you can let me know the field office you went to and the person you spoke with, that's the level of detail that's helpful in being able to bring it to the public affairs specialist and to the regional office up in Boston to try and get some resolution. So as these things are happening, if you can tell me what day you went to the office and who you spoke with, that level of detail is helpful in trying to follow up and get to a place of more consistency. It really varies a little bit, Claudette, like you said right now. Different field offices have been operationalizing this a little bit differently. And James,
then
I know you
different
had your
staff
hand
within
up.
one field office too, right? So that you have inconsistency among people, which is also a challenge. But I would make friends with the person who's given me the most, and that's who I would be bringing. You know, those amazing donuts Sylvia would bring whenever we used to have a meeting together in person. That's who I'd be bringing my donuts to, right? Because that is true and that's true of every linkage on this page. You could have a formal relationship, but it's really great to have a relationship with people, right? Not just be an agency, but to know the people there, to have some connections that you're working together. James, your hand was up for a while and I saw you put it down. So let me just to give you a shot. If you still want to talk, I'd love to hear what you wanted to raise.
Yeah, and maybe I misheard it. I was gonna go back just really quick to sobriety, if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
I know you said that it does it I know that sobriety is not a prerequisite to housing, obviously. And we don't really want to I know we want to bring it up to people, but and this is never a moral framing for me, but how do we not address sobriety when we know that it will eventually impact their housing?
It's a really important. I see Andrea's already rolling. Right. What's the word? Go ahead, Andrea, and then I'll
So
jump after you.
nobody's saying we don't address sobriety, right? And we do address sobriety. I think it's the assumption that that's going to be their goal. I think that part of our job is when we're addressing sobriety is helping people recognize the signs and symptoms, recognize when they're out of control, recognize how it's affecting their life, and that our part of our job is to help people see that. But I think that assuming that their goal is sobriety when it's not, and they're doing it for us, is problematic. So that we definitely want to address it, right? We want to offer people remedies. First of all, if do they think that the drinking the night before has anything to do with them not getting to their job? Is there something else that we can do? And offering them other solutions, right? Which would always include treatment, but not be restricted to treatment, because we want people to see the reason to get sober, and that's the big part of what we work on. Does that make sense?
That does. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Well, and I think helping, if it's caused people's homelessness before, we talked about that,
Yeah.
to make that link for folks, right? They didn't
Mm-hmm.
pay their rent because they were spending all their money on drugs or alcohol or their friends and the parties, so that you still want to bring it up and say, hey, buddy, I'm worried, a little bit worried about you out in an apartment. Your friends, you owe your friends a lot of favors. Last time letting them in, hang out and drinking caused you to lose your housing, right? Caused you to get evicted, whatever the situation was. So we definitely want to talk about it. We don't want to judge people for it. I mean, it is a sickness like diabetes, right? Or something like that. But we want to help them understand how it's impacting their life, right? And then talk about what are the options for addressing it, right? And having an honest conversation, if you think it's going to come up with people in their housing, is a responsible thing to do, in a way of like, well, what's going to happen when you move into your apartment? How are you going to say no to your friends? How are you going to, how are you going to manage to pay that 30% or whatever the rent is? Because a lot of people are not getting a subsidy. So they're going to have to pay more than 30% of their income when you have to choose, between the bottle or the drugs and alcohol and the rent. And that may be, something the person's really like, well, I guess that is, maybe I'm ambivalent about sobriety and I really wasn't, I'm not sure. Right. And for someone to tell us they're not sure, and instead of telling us, oh yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get
Mhm.
sober and everything's going to be fine. Because if anybody's done any work with people in recovery, especially our folks in the street, it's a long road back, right? It's a
Yeah.
long, hard road, recovery. And so we want to support people in that. But if it's going to be a breeze, we certainly want to, help them be prepared. And it's part of the resources detox and rehab, back in the old days used to be able to get long-term residential care for people with drug and alcohol problems, use problems. But those resources aren't there anymore. But I know I heard from I think it was in Hartford. I think Sarah shared this at last week's session, right? With people who are coming out of rehab, they're paying for sober housing for them so that they're not coming out of rehab and going right into the street or back to the camp where everybody's using, right? So we definitely want to address it, and we want to address it as a problem in living and something that's probably giving the person some discomfort, right? And some part of them is unhappy with their use. So hopefully, I'm glad you raised it, James, because I think that it is part of the what people can think, oh, it's not important. Well, it is. We also know, like, so somebody maybe they drink and they get violent. Well, we want to make sure we have that conversation before they move into housing and they start getting into fights with people when they get drunk, right? Because then they're going to be evicted. And we're do all this work on housing without addressing that problem. So it's a really important part. And it's really important if people are interested in sobriety and treatment to have access to the AA and NA meetings in your
Yep.
area, to know the detox, to know that lady at detox who can get you in with that call, right? To know what the supports are. I know in New York City now, almost every AA or NA meeting is online. So if someone have a computer, they could actually be in meetings all day long, which is a lot of support, right? So as opposed to having to go out and travel, things like that. So we want to make sure our toolbox is filled with all these different resources. I think also I want to talk a little bit about the faith connection, which we were in our organization not very good at, but for a lot of people, that was a connection they wanted to make, was a faith community, and that gave them hope and inspiration and community and support, and the list goes on and on. So similarly, like, don't assume people don't want that just because maybe you have a different or whatever. I think we were kind of secular to the max in our shop. Also some legal services, and we're going to do actually a training for that really talks about some of the justice involved issues for folks, but we definitely want to have legal connections to legal services for people, because that may be something that they're going to need to address in order to get housing and move forward. And then also employment opportunities. So I just want to kind of
Why?
shout out for that.
What?
Thank you.
I don't know. Ms. Tyson, were you going to say something before? And I just went blah, 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 blah. No. Okay.
I
Okay.
was, but you
Oh,
were
okay.
going. I was gonna say about the churches. I know in some of my other job experiences, we've had a good couple of churches that had different recovery groups for people. So like a lot of times, like you said, depending on the case manager's faith-based, but you kind of fill your clients out, and if they're open to that, that's a whole nother connection for them. For natural supports is a church connection, and they're offering these groups at the church for recovery, etc. And they're building healthy relationships, which that's what we all want them to have, is healthy friendships and relationships. So when we're not there, they'll be able to maintain.
Molly just
Yep.
put a resource in the chat.
Great. Yep. I see that. And I thank you for that, Ms. Tyson. I think that there's also fellowship. There's a ride to church on Sunday. There's a meal. There's maybe Dress for Success is the part of the mission of their shop. So they have some clothes. So thank you for bringing that up. It's such a broad resource. And then Molly put this, it's on the slides too, when we're going to get to it in a minute, but there is a SOAR position still, so even though the feds closed the SOAR TA at Policy Research Associates, there's still SOAR in Connecticut, which is great. So I'm going to jump to that slide. In terms of partners and making linkages, so I think the most important thing about this slide is, even though there's too much on it and it looks like it's totally full, that's not every resource that exists, right? There are more resources. I don't think the food pantry is on here, right? There's food services, there's animal welfare services, and like the Humane Society and things like that. And it's important to kind of figure out what you need in your area and make sure you're coordinated. I know that Connecticut is pretty well organized. Resources have been around for a while, but make sure you know what's out there. I kind of think you might, you can rely on the other word of like, well, Andrea says that mental health clinic is okay, and she could describe what it's like in the waiting room. I might be able to refer my client there without going there, but I know when I was doing direct service, I wanted to kind of have a firsthand experience of all the places I was sending people. So that included AA meetings or NA meetings. I went to many of those just to check them out so that we could be knowledgeable about the resource, right? And we want to have connections, just like Claudette's bringing the donuts over to the Social Security. We want to introduce ourselves. And really, it is effective and it is in the evidence and the science to go with people the first time they go to a new resource, or if they're going to a resource that's going to be particularly challenging, like in this day and age, going to Social Security. The message that's coming from the feds is not, oh, you're entitled. The message is you're a fraud, right? And that's, there's a new position actually in the White House cabinet for a fraud, czar or something like that. So, in particular, I think with some of the things that people may be a little more challenging with changes that are going on, we want to offer to accompany people. But it is a best practice the first time people check out a resource that we go with them, because then we can see how they did with the resource. Did they get antsy in the waiting room? Did they flatter the woman at the front desk, which is a very good skill? Yes, that's what you do. You flatter. You don't insult the woman at the front desk, right? Because how do you get to the back of the line? Oh yeah, I just want to call out. I see a lot of resources popping up in the chat. Thank you. On the Imani Breakthrough Project. Okay, thanks. Another great resource. I think one thing that's always great is that we do find in every meeting some resources that we don't know about. So even if you feel like your can is really well organized and you know every resource, don't make that assumption. There may be something new, there may be something out there. So keep looking. And I think that keeping those relationships alive between us and those service providers is important to get our clients what they need, right? So keep your promises to them. Couple of slides on income, and I think then we'll probably wrap it up for today. It's kind of a natural spot. We want to make sure we are helping people apply for benefits. I got a bunch of links on the next slide. We've already talked about military service, very important. People may be, and they think maybe because of the way they were discharged that they're not eligible. Eligibility for VA service is very complicated. We don't have enough weeks to explain all the rules. So if somebody has served in the military, let's get them over to the VA, let them do that eligibility determination. But that often comes with income. So depending on the nature of the discharge, more than one veteran we know has been surprised that they were entitled to a pension from the VA. We also want to be mindful people are probably making some money right now. They're probably making money, on an ongoing basis, because we don't live in a complete barter society. You need to have some money. So are they doing, kind of informal work, or are they, doing the vans and doing construction during day labor kind of things? Do they have a relationship with a shopkeeper? So we don't want to rule that out as a way that people make income, right? We don't want to be kind of Pollyannas. And then here's the links. So it's pretty easy in Connecticut to go online and see what you're eligible for and see what's up there. As I mentioned, the SOAR, SSDI, SSI Outreach, Access and Recovery TA, that was ended by in 2025. But DEMIS has a website that Molly shared with you. And PRA, which is Policy Research Associates, they have maintained a website with a newsletter that has some resources on it. So that's the link to that. And it seems like a couple people from their team might be starting a business, but you have to pay them right now if you want to get SOAR TA. So they don't have a government grant. Then here, there's also a link to the American Job Centers. If you haven't visited the centers in your area, take a field trip. Go meet those people, see how you need to meet those folks. Go there, see how you can coordinate. And then DEMIS also has supported employment contacts in here. So use these links to see what you can come up with for folks. And I think before we go into the housing options and the housing transition, I think that's a natural place to break for the day. So you guys will get a few minutes back on your day, which is probably a gift since you're totally busy. We'll pick up with these slides because this is really about the transition to housing, which is an important bit of content. But let's just share some resources that we have for you that I think are important. If you missed the last session, the slides and the recording are linked here in case you weren't able to come last time or someone else on your team didn't. Our next session for this, session 3 for this series is in 2 weeks. So not next week, but the 31st. And then the next scheduled webinar will be safety on outreach, and the dates will be coming. So let's just keep an eye out for that. Community of practice schedules, the April 2nd is the next one. So that's a couple weeks from now, Thursday morning, and there's your link for that. And then tomorrow is the quarterly outreach meeting. So it's outreach, a lot of outreach this week. There's the link. I don't know, Molly, did you want to say anything about it or just come?
Yeah, just be there. We've got an agenda. I sent it out to folks. If folks have anything else they want to try and make sure we address statewide, just kick me an email or give me a call.
Thanks, Molly. And then here's this training inventory, and that's all linked in here, and other resources. Oops, did I go the wrong way? Okay, there we go. And there's everybody's email address. So that's all in the slides. Hopefully you got them. If you didn't, let us know, and we'll be happy to share them again. And we will see you in a couple weeks, and you have time to actually, I'm going to suggest 2 things. Take a breath and, maybe take a second one, because you got a few minutes between this and your next meeting. So thanks for your participation with us. Anybody have anything they want to raise, or just say goodbye? Maybe turn your cameras on. Say, nice to see you. It was nice to see you. We appreciate you and all your hard work.
You guys are the best. Truly the best.
Thank
Best
you. You
people.
guys are the